Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I am bringing you the mid-year book freakout tag. I was tagged by Anna at Actual Spinster, who I will link below, and thank you Anna, it's really sweet of you to tag me. This is the first time I have been tagged to do a video, so I'm excited. This mid-year book freakout tag is basically almost like a mid-year best of type of list. So it's got a lot of questions, and I was very strict with myself, and I only allowed myself to choose one answer for each question. So there are a ton of other books that I wish I could have said, but I did limit myself to just one. Number 1, best book you've read so far in 2019. So the best book that I've read so far is very hard to categorize because I've read so many really, truly amazing books. But I think the one that is going to stick with me the longest and that has had maybe the deepest impact on the way that I think about things is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This book is really, really powerful. It is Ta-Nehisi Coates' sort of memoir of growing up Black in kind of a difficult neighborhood in the US, and about how that really affected the way that he looked at the world, his options, the just sort of systemic difficulties of growing up Black in the US. And he writes this memoir almost as a letter to his son. And I think that for somebody who is not a Black man, it's really, really powerful and informative and gives you such key insight into the difficulties that that involves. So I really loved this book. I think it's gonna go on my list of favorites of all time, not just of 2019. Number 2. Best sequel you've read so far in 2019. I think the best sequel that I've read so far is Artificial Condition by Martha Wells, and this is the second book in the Murderbot series. This series, if you haven't heard of it, is absolutely hilarious and fast-paced and so much fun. It's a sci-fi series about Murderbot, who is sort of like part robot, part human, and it is a very antisocial, anxiety-prone bot who works as a security guard, basically, but it hacks its governor module, so it's able to be in control of itself. It's not just a robot, it's actually a little bit closer to human at that point because it can control its own actions. But the things it chooses to do is basically just like, it just wants to watch soap operas and like get through its day job and have its time to itself. But it sort of gets involved with other people and starts learning how to care about them and how to kind of emerge from this shell that it has protected itself with. So I really love this series. It's so sweet and so funny and brings up a lot of really interesting questions about what it means to be human. Number 3, new release you haven't read yet but want to. I think the top of my list for this is going to be Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This is a new collection of sci-fi short stories, but I have read the previous collection very recently called Stories of Your Life and Others, and that collection by Ted Chiang was so amazing. I did a video review of that as well, so I will link that below if you want to check it out. But basically, Ted Chiang does these short stories where he looks at science fiction very much from the speculative perspective of what would happen if humanity encountered these sorts of different situations or had this kind of different technology. How would humanity change? And there's just so many really interesting questions brought up by that I can't wait to see what this new collection holds. Number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I don't pay too much attention to new releases, but I have heard people talking about a book that really intrigues me, which is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this, I've heard really good things about the author, about Silvia Moreno Garcia for some of her other works, but what really intrigues me about this is the premise and the setting. So it is about a girl who, it sounds almost like a Cinderella type story, who encounters the Mayan god of death. And it's set in Mexico in the 1920s, 1930s, very much Art Deco time period. And everything about this premise really speaks to me. I love mythology, I love the 1920s, 1930s, all of that really appeals to me. And in particular, one thing that really makes me want to read this is that a couple of years ago, I played quite an old video game called Grim Fandango. and I loved it. And in Grim Fandango, it's very much set in the like 1920s, 1930s, maybe 40s even, but it has kind of an Art Deco feel, almost a Maltese Falcon feel even, and I just loved that atmosphere of that video game so much. Oh, and it's very much Dia de los Muertos, like everybody is skeletons and things like that. I just loved that so much that I would love to be immersed in another version of that kind of world. Number 5, biggest disappointment. So I think that the biggest disappointment I had this year was a book I thought I would love, and instead it was just so meh that I ended up DNFing it, which was Dimension of Miracles by Robert Sheckley. So I had never heard of this book before. It was written in the 1960s, but on Audible, there was an audio version narrated by John Hodgman, who I adore. I love John Hodgman. And it was part of a Neil Gaiman Presents series. So I love Neil Gaiman. I love John Hodgman. And the description of this was very much that it was sort of a similar story to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I also love. So I went into this thinking I was going to absolutely adore this audiobook, and instead it was just meh. Like, there was nothing that really interested in me. I was mainly just bored. There were a couple of things that actually annoyed me about this story. It was just not my type of book, and that was so sad because I had been so looking forward to it. Number 6, biggest surprise. I think the biggest surprise that I had this year was the book Kindred by Octavia Butler. It was a book that I'd heard a lot about, but I didn't know what to expect. And when I went into that, I was not prepared. I think I had some version of it in my mind of what I thought it would be, and it was something totally different. It was something that was not easily consumable in a lot of places. It really brought up a lot of very tough issues and tough choices, and nothing was black and white. It was just this muddle of difficulties and very torn loyalties and so much complexity. So I went into this expecting kind of a standard story, and it was not. I was just so surprised and in awe of how amazing this book was and how much it made me think, and also a little bit surprised by how much I loved it. I tend not to like things that have such darkness and so much just really unhappiness and violence and difficult themes. But reading this book, I just fell in love with it, and I fell in love with everything it had to offer, and I felt like it made me grow as a reader. So that was a big surprise for me. Number 7, favorite new author. I have so many favorite new authors this year, but the one that really stands out to me, because I think I will pick up anything that he writes, is P. Djeli Clark. P. Djeli Clark wrote The Black God's Drums and The Haunting of Tramcar 15. And I think what is so magical about what P. Djeli Clark does is he creates these amazing steampunk type worlds where alternate history is used and magic is integrated, and so many different cultures and so many different experiences are integrated into these beautiful, I don't know what to call them, just beautiful stories where you have characters who you love. And I cannot get enough of his writing, and I will pick up anything else that I find by him. So he's definitely my favorite new author. Number 8, newest fictional crush. For this, it's definitely going to be Suan Sanche. Suan Sanche is from the series The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and in particular, I really love her in book 5, The Fires of Heaven. Suan Sanche is the Amarylline Seat. The Amarylline Seat is the leader of the kind of collection of sorceresses or witches, the women who wield magical power. And in this world, the Amarylline Seat is basically the most powerful person. There are kings, there are emperors, there are leaders of many, many nations, but all of them sort of bow down to her in terms of her influence. She has a lot of political influence, and she has a lot of weight on her shoulders as well. She's looking out for the well-being of the entire world and trying to make sure that they navigate through a lot of difficult times that are coming with the end of the world, basically. That's what this whole book series is about. And she is such a strong character. She has so much determination, so much grit. She is going to make sure that she looks out for the well-being of the whole world, no matter what it takes, and no matter what obstacles she faces or what goes wrong. And a lot of things go wrong for her. She has to face a lot of very difficult situations, and she is not crushed by them. She comes through. She is strong, and she is going to get stuff done, no matter what kind of sacrifices it takes. And I'm in awe of her character, and like, this is definitely a huge crush for me. Number 9, newest favorite character. Again, there are so many great characters out there, but I think the one that really stands out to me is Grandma Harkin from the Jackalope Wives and Other Stories collection by T. Kingfisher. Grandma Harkin is so great. She's an older woman and she has magical powers, but really she just wants to live her life. She lives kind of in a house on the edge of town in something like New Mexico, Arizona, that kind of area. And she just wants to grow her tomatoes and do her own thing, and she doesn't want to deal with any of this, drama of young people. But occasionally she gets drawn into something where there's somebody who just clearly needs her help, and I guess she has to help them. And I love that crotchetiness. I love how crotchety she is, and I love how compassionate she is, but without meaning to be. And I could read stories about her all day. Number 10, book that made you cry. I cry so easily, so there are a ton of books that I could list here, but one that I really remember making me cry was The Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps by Kai Ashanti Wilson. And this story is really beautiful. Not only is the prose incredibly beautiful, I find it very, very poetic, but just the story. It's set in this kind of magical world that has caravans that go through a very difficult area, and these caravans are protected by groups of mercenary men, and one of these men is magical, Damane, and he's kind of a demigod. Actually, he has quite a few powers, and his story is so sweet and so beautiful, and just really, it made me very much cry, especially at the end of the story. So Kai Ashanti Wilson is also on my list to pick up anything he writes, because his writing is gorgeous and I love his characters, and it's just beautiful. Number 11, book that made you happy. For this, I think that the book that made me happiest this year so far was Cuentos de Buenas Noches para Niños Rebeldes by Elena Favilli and Francesco Cavallo. And this is the Spanish language version of Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. And I'd picked up this book on a trip. We were in Peru, and I picked this up because I was like, oh, I love this book in English and I want to read more in Spanish. And so it has a lot of really positive associations for me. It was a fun trip that we took. It's in Spanish. It is a collection of 100 stories of little mini bios of all of these women, and that was very inspirational for me when I read it in English the first time. And then it took me months, like almost, I think, a year, to finally read through this book. And I read through it and I loved it, and I felt so accomplished for having read this in Spanish, and I was so happy with all the memories it had associated with it, and it was just such a good book. So this book made me really, really happy to read. Number 12, favorite book to film adaptation you saw this year. I haven't seen too many films at all. I don't really watch very many movies, but I did see the Netflix TV series Good Omens, and I loved that. That was very much my style of humor, very much my style of TV show, I really, really loved that. This is based on the book Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Again, two favorite authors. I had read Good Omens, I don't know how long ago, a decade ago maybe. I don't super remember when I read it, and I didn't super remember all the details of the story, which meant that I had very positive associations with the story, but I didn't necessarily remember all the details, which is very good for me when watching an adaptation, because if I have recently read it, I start doing all of the comparisons, and then that brings me out of the moment. So I was able to fully immerse in this, and I just loved the way it was done. I'm actually really excited because a lot of Neil Gaiman's works are being currently turned into TV shows, so I want to watch more of those. Number 13, favorite video you've done so far this year. I think that in terms of the most fun to film, I would have to say one of the ones with my husband. Those are just really fun to film. At least for me, he gets a little anxious about them, but I have such a good time. The most recent one that we did, which I will link below, is the discussion of the 2019 Hugo finalist novelettes. And that was just a lot of fun to discuss our thoughts about. I also just really enjoyed the reading that we did of the novelettes before we made that video, and the discussions that we had before we made the video of, what do we want to say? So that whole process was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it, and I like videos done with him. Number 14, most beautiful book you have bought or received so far this year. So I think that by far the most beautiful book that I have received as a gift from my husband Sush in recent past is this one, which is a little hard to see because it's got silver on the cover, but it is called The World of Mucha by Hiroshi Uno. And this book is about the artist Alphonse Mucha, who was a Czech artist that made really gorgeous Art Nouveau pieces of art at the end of the 1800s. And if you have not seen Art Nouveau, it is just spectacular. So I'm going to cover my face a little bit to show you just how gorgeous this book is. So they've got these beautiful images of especially kind of these fantasy type women. And it's got such pretty lines and gorgeous curves and this kind of love of flowers and art. It's just so pretty and just perfect for fantasy, I think. So some of these, if you can just see, they're just absolutely gorgeous. I think Art Nouveau in general is lovely, but I think that these really epitomize what I find so beautiful about that art period. So, okay, I will stop showing you pictures, but it is just really lovely work, and I need to get around to actually reading the book because it's so pretty. Number 15, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? The list for this is so long of the books that I really strongly want to read. And each month I'm making a TBR of sort of the priority that I'm focusing on and what I'm going to be reading. But in addition to all of those, the book that I think right now I most need to read is Becoming by Michelle Obama, because it finally came through from my library. I put a hold on this book forever ago, months and months ago, on the audiobook, and the wait was just so long. Finally, it has come through at my library, so if I don't listen to this before it goes back to the library, I'm going to just cry with sadness because I waited for so many months. So this is top on my list right now. So that wraps up my responses for the mid-year book freakout tag. If you have done this tag, please let me know below. I would love to see what your answers are. If you have not yet done this tag but you're interested, I tag you. You are now tagged. Go do it. Make your video and then let me know below because I want to see what you have to say. I think a lot of people have already done this video, and those who have not have many of them already been tagged. But I did notice that there were a few people who have not done this video, and so I wanted to explicitly tag them just to let them know that I'm interested in what they have to say, what their responses are. And you guys, if I tag you and you don't want to do it, just don't do it. So first is Jade at Bedtime Bookworm, then Eva at Eva Strange, and Alicia at Pretty Brown Eyed Reader, Andrea at Infinite Text, Joe at Final Blow Joe, and Rhea at The Bookfinch. I don't know why you haven't done this yet. So I want to hear what you guys have to say, and just, I love hearing book recommendations. So please, anybody who's interested, go ahead and do this tag.